And event industry, over the last couple of years has seen a lot of suffering. It has gone through some of the toughest times. 10 million people part of this industry, yet we feel the government is not giving us the space and the place that we merit. So we have with us some great speakers today to discuss few important issues. We have Mr. Sanjay Roy, MD, Teamwork Arts, Sushma Gaikwad, co-founder ICE Global, Mr. Rajiv Jain. Thank you. He's traveling right now, but joined us. Thank you so much, Director, Rashi Entertainment. We have Prerna Saxena, founder of the Theme Weavers Designs, and Hariom Seth, founder Tag Labs. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Roy, my first question to you directly is, what should we expect, first of all, from this budget, and why have we been neglected for so long?
Two very difficult questions. What should we expect from the budget? I think the government has very little wiggle room right now, given the state of the economy and the pressure that the economy has, and given that collections have been low. You saw the economic survey today. If you're looking at a 9.8 contraction last year, 7.2 growth this year, you're still looking at a very small growth margin overall. And given that, obviously, the government's not going to be able to do very much. Unfortunately, Ruhail, I think the entertainment and the creative industry segment always gets the raw end of the stick. We very rarely get the kind of appreciation that we need. I think everybody talks about India's great cultural heritage, and everybody on every occasion, political, social, religious, economic activity, you always have some event. And in India, certainly from cradle to grave, we celebrate our very existence, all the way from births to weddings to death. And yet, despite all of that, this is a sector that continues to be neglected. I don't think most governments understand the connection between this sector, the fact that for every $1 million of investment into this sector, you can get about 99 to 103 jobs, as opposed to $1 million of investment in built industry where you get 7 jobs. Look at the difference of it. And it's not just about a song and dance. Everybody looks at us song and dance. It's not about that. It's the whole ecosystem, whether it's the flower seller, the ragi in the Gurdwara, the people doing the catering, the enormous wedding industry that India has. That realization hasn't happened. Just to end, look at the, if you look at the UK economy, 18% of the UK's GDP is contributed to by the creative sector, which is a total of their oil and gas and banking industry put together. Look at the opportunity that we have. We continue to be a sunshine sector. One day the sun will rise and shine upon us, even if you're in Delhi in the gloom of this pollution.
Well, valid points, Mr. Roy, and we hope, the government is able to realize the kind of suffering we are all in. Mr. Jain, to you, you have been interacting. In fact, I think you're going to meet somebody from the government. Is there anything, any hope for us? And also to you, the same question, that why does it take us so long to get a due share in the voice of the entire piece of budget economy?
रोहिल, सबसे पहली बात, काफी चीजें मिस्टर संजय राव ने डिस्क्राइब की है बहुत अच्छे ढंग से, बट आप सबसे बड़ी बात, इस देश में आप रहते हैं तो आपको आपकी चीज का डंका बजाना पड़ता है, आपको कानों तक बात पहुंचानी पड़ती है किसी भी बात को मांगने के लिए। एक बहुत अच्छा 8 पॉइंट का एजेंडा हमारी एनईसी, ईमा की एनईसी ने सबमिट किया था प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफिस और फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर के ऑफिस के अंदर, और बहुत वैलिड बातें कर रहे हैं उसके अंदर जो होता है, wherein we are talking about GST जो हम लोगों ने जमा करा है इस 2 साल के अंदर, आप उसको लेवरेज दो और उसको आगे एक्सटेंड करो। ये लोग बात कर रहे हैं जो एम्प्लॉय के हमने 50% पैसे काटे जो आज तक टैक्स देता है, उसमें से हमारे को कुछ रिबेट करके वापस करो या इन टीम मेंबर्स को वापस करो। हम बात कर रहे हैं जो मॉन्यूमेंट्स हैं, उन मॉन्यूमेंट्स को इवेंट्स पे इस्तेमाल करने दिया जाए। आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट मिस्टर रॉय स्पीकिंग अबाउट 8% जीडीपी एंड 2% जीडीपी। वी आर टू स्मॉल इंडस्ट्री फॉर ऑल दीज थिंग्स। हम लोग एक 5 लाख करोड़ की इंडस्ट्री है, हमको हमारा शेयर चाहिए। आज की तारीख के अंदर हम बात करें, टेंडर पिच करने होते हैं तो 20 करोड़ का टर्नओवर है, 25 करोड़ का टर्नओवर मेरी जैसी 4 कंपनियां पिच कर सकती है। क्यों हर क्रिएटिव माइंड को पिच करने दिया जाए आज के अंदर? These are simple demands that our EMA NEC has put across to the finance minister and to the prime minister. We expect some kind of a result. But yes, definitely, ये लोगों ने 20 लाख करोड़ का बजट, 20 लाख करोड़ का एक पैकेज दिया था मिसेस सीतारामन ने. मुझे नहीं मालूम वो 20 लाख करोड़ रुपए में से I have not been able to get 200 rupees also out of it. Wherein I'm being a huge taxpayer for last 15 years time, 20 years time. I'm paying by my nose. तो कुछ ना कुछ तो कल अगर ये चाहते हैं, एक हैप्पी सेक्टर है, हम लोग हैप्पीनेस इंपार्ट करते हैं, अगर ये कुछ हमारे को हैप्पीनेस दे देंगे तो बाकी कंट्री में हैप्पीनेस हम इंपार्ट कर देंगे. कुछ ना कुछ अगर हमारी बातें एक भी आदमी ब्यूरोक्रेट सुन रहा है और आपके प्रोग्राम को देख रहा हो, अभी पूरी रात बाकी है, करें कुछ ना कुछ हमारे लिए कि कल हम लोग एक खुश हों. और इवेंट इंडस्ट्री के बारे में आप बजट में मेंशन कर दें हमारे लिए, तो वही एक बहुत बड़ी खुशी होगी. दिस इंडस्ट्री हैज टू कीप ऑन फाइटिंग. ट्रस्ट ऑन मी. मेरी इंडस्ट्री अभी जीडीपी की बात नहीं कर सकती है. मेरी इंडस्ट्री अभी देश की ग्रोथ, मेरी इंडस्ट्री
I think some network issue
catering
there.
industry, event industry, hotel industry.
Right.
आप
Right.
इन सारी को देखिए, 5 लाख करोड़
Right.
ऑर्गेनाइज या अनऑर्गेनाइज पैसा आता है, और जैसा बताया 10 मिलियन लोग इसके अंदर काम करते हैं. प्लीज उनको देखें कल के बजट के अंदर. I've been speaking at various national channels. I've been speaking at various newspapers about all these things. We should be listened. We should be listened, Rohil. मेरे pointers मैंने आपको भेजे थे. This is EMA's viewpoint. सुषमा है हमारे साथ में, वो बोलेंगी इसके ऊपर. प्रेरणा है, वो बोलेंगी इसके ऊपर. बट आप मेरे से स्पेसिफिक बात कर सकते हैं तो प्लीज टैग दिस प्रोग्राम टू द प्राइम मिनिस्टर एंड टू द फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर. बहुत मुश्किल है कलम सुने जाएंगे, बहुत मुश्किल है. उनके गम और हैं, बट हमारी रिक्वेस्ट है हमको सुना जाए.
Right. Right. Great. Ms. Gaikwad, you heard Mr. Roy and Mr. Jain, before you. Where is the gap? I mean, kya hamare mein koi kami hai? Haven't we taken enough steps, to kind of, make ensure that, people look at us and they recognize us? How do you see this entire piece and what should we expect tomorrow? Do you think there are any expectations at all?
Well, I thank you so much, Rohil, for the question. I hope not to sound too cynical in my answer. Yet, I think there is definitely a gap. We've been, like Rajiv had said very clearly, we've been rallying. We've been rallying for over 7 years now. I think the biggest cause for concern is, number one, we're not recognized as an industry. That's the first point of view. So when you're not recognized as an integral part of the media and entertainment industry, obviously all the rebates that go with it, or all the lowering of GST that goes with it, is something that we've completely missed the boat on. Recognition and the perspective, I'm 100% sure. I don't think that nobody knows the worth of the industry and how big the industry is. I think it is a lack of determination and a lack of purpose when it comes to the other side of it. I can't pinpoint what could be the reason, but certainly there could be maybe just lack of let's get up and go and let's recognize the event industry as an integral part of the media and entertainment industry. So what I really feel also is when you're not part of an industry or not, I don't know what the word is, Sanjoy, if you could give me that word, we're not recognized as organized industry, subsidiaries that go with it, boost for SMEs. In fact, majority of our industry is even lower the SME line. We've got freelancers, artisans, artists who can't even be recognized as an SME. All those, that entire structure is completely lost. So as a result of which we suffer when we cannot ask for lower GST, we suffer when we cannot get IT exemptions, we suffer when we cannot push for increasing the IT slam. And I think that's where our suffering comes from. And I completely agree with Rajiv. I think it's time for now us to scream out loud and get and be like the little baby that has not been noticed. So, the crying baby gets milk. I think it's about time that we really do that. The baby that cries the most gets the milk.
Right. Prerna ji, your thoughts and the sector, like, you and Rajiv ji, we think this is the driver of the economy. The kind of spends are there. It is not just one industry. It pulls around a whole lot of other sectors with it. So what are your thoughts when we talk about getting our due, not being not getting those benefits from this budget. What are your views? How do you see it?
The first thing is, I can't agree more with Sanjoy, Sushma, and Rajiv about what they have to say about the industry, because I have also personally gone and represented the industry with government and all. And like, to my surprise, they said that, what is your problem if you are not a separate industry? You know, if you're part of media, Rajiv ji was there in the meeting. So they don't even see that there is a problem. You know, like how Sushma is pointing out point by point that what happens if we don't have a separate recognition as an industry, what happens to us, right? So we're not heard. So the biggest problem is we are not heard, and that's what we're trying to fight. And like how Sanjoy said, that we are basically where a lot of things start. So we are this nexus. How I feel about our industry, we are this nexus, and there's a whole web which is around us. You know, so people are still able to see the web, but they're not seeing from where it's starting. They're not seeing the nexus. You know, and also why is the industry not getting organized? It is because, accepted or not, there is a lot of cash which is there. You know, like when you're playing the flower market, so it is not getting acclimated. We are not able to put those data together because there's a lot of things happening which is in, you know, outside to the small things which is not coming together. But who's starting all this? We are starting all this.
Right.
There is an event, you know, that's why maybe a flower guy gets something, the laborers get something. You know, in our events, there are at times 1,000, like, of course, I'm talking pre-COVID, but there are 1,000 laborers who are getting employed, and a lot of them are daily wagers. So there is so much revenue generated, but not understood from where is it coming.
Absolutely. I get your point. Before I go to Mr. Seth, I want to go to Mr. Jain, because I know we can lose his connection anytime. He's traveling.
I am just reaching the minister's house. We are going for a Thanksgiving. So आपको कुछ और पूछना हो?
Yes.
Otherwise,
My
you got very
question to you
good
is,
panel.
Jain Saab, if tomorrow we are again let down, which everybody thinks so, कि ऐसा होने वाला है, what should we do? What should be the stand as an industry? Should we soft pedal it like, ठीक है, अगली बार try करेंगे? What is the practical solution next time to get that industry status?
नहीं, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, ये आज हमारी सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम हमारी एसोसिएशन की भी है कि हम केवल व्हाट्सएप पे ऑपरेट करने की कोशिश करते हैं, एक दूसरे से बात करने की कोशिश करते हैं और सब कुछ व्हाट्सएप पे करते हैं. We all have to change within ourselves. हम लोग 5 लाख करोड़ की इंडस्ट्री हैं. We all should be heard. Every member of EMA or every event industry professional is a power in itself. अगर हर आदमी उठ के अपने हिसाब से गवर्नमेंट के अंदर अगर बताने की कोशिश करेगा कि हमारे को आप इनकम टैक्स में रिबेट दीजिए, 18% जीएसटी से 12% कीजिए, आप जीएसटी का हमारे को आगे एक्सटेंशन दीजिए, हमारे को कोई ना कोई बेनिफिट्स दीजिए. बिलीव ऑन मी, दिस इज सच अ पावर इंडस्ट्री. ये कोई ना कोई बेनिफिट अपने लिए निकाल सकती है. बट सबसे पहले केवल व्हाट्सएप पे जो एक दूसरे से बात करते हैं और खुश हो लेते हैं, वो हमारी इंडस्ट्री को बंद करना होगा कि देयर इज अ वर्ल्ड आउटसाइड दिस व्हाट्सएप आल्सो. उस वर्ल्ड में जाके अटैक करना होगा तो बेनिफिट. इट्स वेरी सिंपल. एक बच्चे को रोटी भी तभी मिलती है या बिस्किट भी तभी मिलता है जब वो रोता है. आज आपको रोना पड़ेगा, सरकार के सामने रोना पड़ेगा. और वी हैव गॉट वेरी कॉम्पिटेंट प्राइम मिनिस्टर, वी हैव गॉट अ कॉम्पिटेंट चीफ मिनिस्टर इन दिल्ली. दे ऑल आर फ्रॉम डिफरेंट पार्टीज, बट हम जब भी उठ के उनके पास राइट ढंग में पहुंचे, हमको कुछ ना कुछ मिला है. आवर एसोसिएशन इज वर्किंग टुवर्ड्स इट in individual capacity. Every event industry professional, catering professional, banquet professional should work towards it. We have achieved a result as an association 4 days back by getting Delhi opened. We are going to thank the minister. We have to keep on fighting this thing. Sanjoy sir is there, who's quite a learned man. उनकी बहुत पकड़ है पूरे हिंदुस्तान के अंदर. वो मदद करें. और हर मेंबर से जो भी सुन रहा हो, गुजारिश है, अपने स्टेट में, अपनी सिटी में, अपने गवर्नमेंट महकमे में पहुंचने की कोशिश करें. बिलीव ऑन मी, 3 महीने में रिजल्ट आ जाएगा. I've reached the minister's house. I will have to say bye to you, Ruhail.
Thank you so
Prerna,
much.
bye. Hariom, bye. And Sanjoy, bye. And God bless you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Sorry, in the cars you couldn't see my ugly face. Huh? Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Take care.
Rajiv. Bye.
Bye, Sushma. See you. Bye.
Okay, Mr. Seth, let me come to you. You know, so we pivoted to event tech.
Right.
And then
They
of
are.
course we have found a lot of takers of this technology. Virtual is the a part of essential part of live events now, all of that. But when you look at this sector compared to other sectors that are they were there in Shark Tanks and everywhere,
Right.
people haven't shown that interest in investing. If that's my observation, I can be wrong. But why
Mhm.
so? Is there also a lack of interest from the investor community to look at events as a something where they can get a lot of revenue?
Right. So I think the investments are coming in the event sector, though the most of the investment which is available in the global economy, they're going to fintech first, and whatever leftovers are there, they're coming to event tech also. So like if you would see some of our peers, they have been able to successfully raise, a couple of $100 million. There are successful success stories, but still I think because event tech still itself is such a new sector which is getting organized and which is getting automated, and it has always been an ad hoc industry. That's why investors have never looked at event tech as a big sector to invest. But I think we are making a move. Things are improving. uh, so I'm very hopeful about at least the investment sector. I'm very hopeful the investments are really coming in this sector, and right now is the right time to pick up a lot of money from the investors. But of course the government, it's a totally different scenario.
Right.
And we have seen the outrage in the group.
Right. Mr.
We're
Roy,
disappointed.
Mr. Roy, I want to come to you here with this question that, whenever there's a lockdown, what we have seen is that event industry quickly comes under a lockdown, and we see, I'm sorry to say, that political rallies go on and weddings are reduced to 50. Is there also a different treatment for the industry so far in the last 2 years? And as we move on, we know that more waves will come and COVID is here to stay. What is your suggestion to people, in the government? How can they ensure that we don't suffer, at least if they're not recognizing it, at least we don't suffer?
Ruhail, there's no scientific evidence that lockdowns in the way that it's done, meaning until unless they've had a peace treaty with COVID Central, that COVID is aware that they can only spread on the weekends when there's a lockdown and not during the weekends, or COVID can spread after 6 o'clock in the evening, etc. So the logic behind a lockdown in the way that it's done, where you have an irrational number, 300 for a political rally, but 20 for a funeral, 100 for a wedding, but 50 for something else, has no real worth and meaning. And as we've seen, I mean, in India, whether you have a number or a rule, etc., by and large, it's flaunted depending upon who you are and where you are and who's willing to look the other way. What would make much more sense, going forward, because as you rightly said, COVID is here to stay, at least for another 2 or 3 years, is that there's some logic around it. And the logic is that you need distance, you need good ventilation. So, for example, if it's an outdoor venue should be encouraged. You should have your limitation, as they've said, of 50% of capacity of the venue. And there is a simple mathematic of 2 by 2 feet for each person. So you look at that as the capacity and then reduce it by 50% to ensure that there's parity across venues. Where there is indoor spaces, you ensure that there is appropriate ventilation. Many hotels and airports, etc., have brought into place new effective technology to be able to ventilate spaces. That's already in place, not just abroad, but in India as well. So this reduces the risk. And most importantly, just ensure a mask mandate for this period. As we know, the minute you have an appropriate mask and 2 people are wearing that appropriate mask, speaking to each other, you're reducing the possibility of infection by 95%. Now, this is scientifically proven. So if it is proven, then why isn't it implemented? Apart from that, I think the other thing that needs to happen is that the disaster management group and the Ministry of Health needs to come out with a standardized suggested policy for different states to follow. And I think nobody wants to get into a situation where they're creating a super spreader event or they are putting people's lives at risk. Nobody in the industry will want to do that. We are happy to follow guidelines. We've shown that guidelines can be followed. So trust us, walk halfway, and we promise you that we will be able to bring about new innovations to be able to help us tide over this particular situation and help those people who need the help the most. People who, if they don't perform, if they don't work, they don't eat at night. This is the kind of, as Sushma and Prerna said, these are the kinds of people who form part of our unorganized sector. And these are the people who can be helped the most.
Thanks. That was actually an elaborate, way of looking at it, and definitely that is the case. And I agree with you that there's no scientific evidence that we have been just believing it. I think nobody has maybe questioned it enough, but it is time to look at it because we have been suffering. Sushmanji, tell me, do you think these lockdowns on a whim, like whims, suddenly they decide they need to lock down? In your view, was there a better way they could have addressed or dealt with it? And give me a real example of how things really panned out in your area of operation, and where are we right now after this third wave, and what should happen now on? How should the regulators see it?
Well, actually, Ruhail, I don't know, you keep directing these very dismal questions to me, which there are really no answers, except the only solution that I can see is exactly what Sanjoy said. It needs to be standardized. All procedures, when it comes to health and safety, require to be standardized across the country. And I would take one step ahead. It should be standardized around the globe. Well, that is something which is administrative and we have no say in it. But I must tell you, I completely, it has been dismal. I'll tell you why. You plan an event and there is an event for say 200, 300, 400 people, because when the lockdown opened up, it became completely, everyone started getting very excited, planning the events, clients started approaching event agencies to organize the events. What ended up happening is when the lockdown happened again, it was a revisit to the earlier scenario. So what I've seen is the market is moving to be a little bit more tentative, at least in the area or the city that I am in. I don't know if you guys feel the same in Delhi, Sanjoy, Prerna, yet in Mumbai, market is tentative. So especially the corporate event market. And what ends up happening is events keep getting pushed and postponed. And that is what's actually creating a dent in our industry. Because, you can't forecast. You cannot really forecast, unlike any other industry. I mean, there's so many industries who've really done well in COVID times. Our industry is one of the industries that has been extremely hit. Another thing is there is no foundation, exactly like I'm repeating what Sanjoy is saying, hopefully a little bit more dramatically, yet there is no foundation for the decisions taken about the weekend lockouts, lockdown. Suddenly it's 20, in 2 days it's 50. I don't know whether the administrative services are operating out of fear, or are they operating out of a sense of, let's at least janta ko dikha de ke hum log jitna kar sake utna kare. I don't know what it could be either, or it could be operating out of I don't know, we don't know, uncertainty. And that being said, I would think that they are proficient enough and smart enough and intelligent enough to actually get all the powers that be. I don't see why the entire media and entertainment industry shouldn't be in a room to sit and discuss what could be the future in health and safety. Who better than the event industry to sit along with the policy makers to figure out what can be the way forward so that safe events can be actually hosted. Yeah. So, and what I see is when I'm going into the particular government office of my state, is that each, like you have hotels and restaurants rallying and going and meeting the powers that be to figure out what they can do for the hotels and restaurants. Then you have film fraternity going and trying to figure out and work out some kind of concession for the film fraternity. And then you have the event industry. I think if the entire media and entertainment industry come together as one, then I think, I don't know, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that some steps can be taken forward.
Great, wonderful. And Ms. Saxena, do you think the sector, the wedding industry, it could have been dealt with in a different way? The kind of restriction that we see suddenly 50, 200. Do you think there needs to be more scientific approach to announcing these regulations? Do you think there can be improvements in this?
So, what's been happening is that, like, we are actually, like how Shishma said, the business becomes so sentimental. It's a wave, we are riding on a tide. So it's like, okay, things are getting better, events are increasing, and it's peaking. And especially in weddings, Rohil, the problem is that it's on a date. Okay. And they're very little dates. They're not many dates. There are few dates on which the weddings can happen. Now, suppose that day it's a lockdown. Okay, so suddenly they announce a lockdown. Like tomorrow is a lockdown. Now the wedding still has to happen on that day. So what happens is half the people decide to do the wedding the same day, but they just scale it down. So a lot of times sometimes you have committed, like, this is going to happen. You've planned everything on that day and it just goes flat because then there is nothing. Because the client is very like, whatever I've paid. I'm not going to pay you more because I've scaled down the wedding. And suddenly from say a 500 wedding is come to a 50 people wedding, and then everything is scaled down. Rather than that, if they have to go for a lockdown also, I feel that there should be at least some kind of notice period. We say, okay, we are going to go into a lockdown, and then we say that we're going to phase out the weddings. Not like tomorrow we're going in a lockdown, and in 2 days we're going in a lockdown, do whatever you want to do. This is something which has really hit the people, and again, for the bigger venues, like, if there are outdoor venues where there can be 1,000 people, okay, why have only 50 people in there? Why not have at least 50% capacity room? Because if you're an outdoor, you can always manage. I can understand the first time. Okay, we didn't know how to deal with it. Okay, the second time, maybe still we didn't know. The third time over again, now we know how to deal with it. Why do we suddenly want to go to 50? It's, I've been getting this whole thing where we feel it's like a loop.
Right.
Plan, and you're like, okay, we're gonna just do this, and then suddenly it's a stop, lockdown, and then again it goes to a peak, and then it's a lockdown. So
yes, absolutely.
And that's what is, what is happening. It is, for some people, it is, people have survived once, twice, third, but the third time over.
Right. Of course, no, I agree with you. I think the knee-jerk responses won't work because you are not only making one sector, it's the entire people associated with it. Somebody who has, for example, locked dates, invested money, of course. Mr. Seth, so hybrid events, all of that we talk about. Are there, do you have, first of all, this event tech sector is rising and, in fact, everyone is talking about it. But the regulator hasn't yet come in, for example, the data is everywhere getting regulated. What are the big concerns this sector has, first of all? Give me a sense of that.
Okay, so I think, so the sector is really promising. One of the biggest concern to make this sector happen is, to which I think our event industry is also facing is, increase some amount of capital inflow be it by helping with the working capital, or be by giving some, like IT sector got a huge rebate when they had to scale up. There were packages given to the IT sector so that they can scale up faster. Now I'm seeing that there are companies who are becoming global giants in event tech right from India. Okay, so if government can look at us as a sector which can bring foreign revenue to India because of export of services like TCS, Infosys, what they have done, they have made India a export hub for IT services. I think right now India is poised to become a export house for media and entertainment services because of the cloud technologies. Like we ourselves, work for US and Canada based clients sitting right here in India. So we are the production control room in India where the event is happening in US and Canada. And I see if we are well supported, we can become the next TCS or Infosys from India. So if the government can look at this opportunity and maybe give us some tax rebates or induce some working capital for us, then we can actually grow at a 10x pace. That's what I feel.
Right. Mr. Roy, so 5 lakh crore is not a small, size, and also what is interesting is that successive regimes have neglected it. It's regime agnostic, I would say. How do we do our storytelling better? Do we look within or the problem is outside? That's one. And second, after my last point this is my final question to all the panelists, that tomorrow, whatever the result, how should we respond to it? We have an association as well. Do we need to tighten things on that side? What is the way ahead that, next 3 or 4 years, things change actually on cloud?
Well, you all are part of the Business World Group, and you know that much of what happens in any sector is based on how much the sector can actually, as you said rightly, tell their story or spin their story. To be able to tell a story, you need facts, you need figures, you need to show government, or whether it's local or state or national government, as to the contribution that that sector makes to the economy and to the local, or a contribution to GDP and the local economy. And therefore, it's important to be able to create appropriate policy. Till we base our foundations on fact, in terms of the numbers of jobs we generate, on what is the turnaround of the sector, and put in place good practices where the sector can be tracked formally. Until unless we're able to do that, numbers that are thrown around, and Rajiv did pose a number, these remain conjecture. And government, as you know, is an expert on conjecture. Many of its own numbers are conjecture, and statistics, as we know, always lie invariably. But that's not good enough. So we have to get our act together, not just as one part of this larger creative economy segment. Remember, the event space is only a part of a larger segment. Hariom talked about the event technology part, which is an enormously growing segment, not just in India, but across the world. Prerna talked about weddings. I mean, the wedding sector in India is one of the fastest growing, and it continued to grow despite the lockdown, meaning people still wanted to get married and they wanted to do it in a particular way. So it's not a segment that suffered per se. And Sushma talked about, corporate and so on and so forth. So we have to get our basic fundamentals together. Tomorrow, the budget in India is one of the few countries where the budget is this big hoo-ha. Budget speeches, yes, sure, they impact taxes a little bit. They impact the way that your wealth or your wealth planning will be handled. But by and large, it looks at allocation, which is the business of the day of all governments. So forget for a second about the budget. Budget is primarily a television-driven, TRP-driven occasion, which everybody is very happy about, because television and newspapers and magazines get their advertising around the budgets. But in actuality, there's a lot of work that happens pre-budget and post-budget, and this particular government, even like the previous government, hasn't restricted its monetary policies only to budget speeches. You've seen a lot of activity pre and post. And I think our responsibility, and as the organization that most of us here are part of, IMA, and it represents a particular segment of this sector, has been very active going out to governments, etc., wearing my FICCI co-chair hat of the creative industries. We've been making representation from FICCI to state governments. And yes, we've had some joy. We have had some joy, and we hope that because culture and the creative economy is both a central subject as well as a state subject, you have to work at it at three levels: at the local city level, because that's where a lot of decisions are taken on entertainment tax as well as policy permissions, etc. At the state level, where again, there's a huge contribution by the state governments to policies in this space. And then, of course, by the overall state government. So I don't see tomorrow to be the make or break. What I think is essential is for us to come together to speak as one voice, as Rajiv mentioned, Sushma mentioned, Hariom said, and Prerna said, speak as one voice and continue to raise these issues. Remember, for the film industry to become an industry, it took them almost 70 years to do so. This will take some time, no doubt, but I think we will get there ultimately.
Thanks, Mr. Roy. Sushma ji, your thoughts of how can we the storytellers of our own worth, so to say, and people take these numbers seriously. I mean, they are there. We have so many people working for us. We generate so much of revenue, but to make them believe that this is true, what needs to change?
I'm going to go a little bit. Sanjoy has really covered it very well about the outward-facing perspective, and I think none of us will be really. I think he said it all. Yeah, I'm going to talk about a little bit of inward-facing. What can we do? Yeah, so let's go inward. Yes, we can do a lot of things. Number one, we can actually start getting organized in the true sense of the word. Without the organized sector branding, it's very important that we get cognizant of health and safety. We get cognizant of perception of what the industry is about, drive a little bit more of integrity in the industry. And when we take those required measures, automatically the perception of the industry will shift. We'll move from being band baja barat walas to somebody to an industry that's contributing to the exchequer country. And I think that is absolutely pivotal. And while that happens simultaneously, we also work on the constant. I mean, the number of representations we have written, it's not even funny anymore. Can do it in our sleep now. Yet continue hammering away, chiseling away. Eventually, there will be the sculpture that will be made. God willing, it will not take another 70 years. God willing, I think that we've got to increase that pace. And yet I'm going to take an opportunity just to say something that has been on my mind for quite some time and use this as an opportunity. And that is, during COVID, was a great showcase for us as event agencies, as experiential managers, as entrepreneurs. It was a wonderful way to showcase what we are all about. And we did to some level. We did showcase our mettle. Yet there were numerous instances where rules were flouted, masks were not worn, overcrowding happened. And I'm not talking about government rallies, I'm talking about actual events. So I think we as an industry also require to take cognizance of the fact that we are contributing members to what the event industry or the experiential industry is being perceived as. And once we do that and take that pride in ourselves, then it is easier to project the truth than it is to project something that is not. So I'm being a little harsh. Please forgive me. I'm being a little harsh and I'm being a little straight.
I think we need to, of course, I think looking inwards is the only way from here on. Prerna ji, what is your take on this? What all should, say, the wedding industry do which we spoke about. You spoke about the knee-jerk reactions that we are at the receiving end of. But what should the industry do on its own side? We, without relying on the government all the time, to be recognized, to benefit in some way, to find a sustainable way of tiding through these waves that come. What is your suggestion?
Can you elaborate the question a little more? Sorry,
So, for example, we know that the budget may not have enough for us. Okay,
Sure.
the tax rebates might not be what we expect, for example. But as an industry, I think, should we go and make a representation in front of the government and say that, look, please, whenever you are announcing lockdown, take us into consultation, talk to us at that point. Do you think some things can change where we can be actively, putting the narrative in front of the government rather than they coming and, giving us the diktat of following it up? Do you think any such step can happen?
Yeah, I got your question. So basically, you're asking that what all can we do
Yes,
with the government?
right.
Also, I think it's both ways. One, we internally educate the industry and say that don't do anything which kind of puts us at the wrong place. Like how Sushma said, that there have been incidences where people did events without wearing the mask, or didn't maintain social distancing, overcrowded the space. And it's not the government is not seeing. Sometimes what happens is that we do things we think no one's seeing. The news travels. Okay. So one, have discipline within the industry and tell them that it's a self-discipline. No one is seeing us, but we should be disciplined and no one can turn around and say, hey, you guys did this, so we did that. And on the other side, continuously interact with the government. The interaction with the government can't stop. Telling them what are our challenges, what are our problems, and how, if there is a problem, how can we kind of deal with it instead of just putting a lockdown from say tomorrow.
Right,
So,
right.
this is the communication that we can do. And I think as event managers, we always have one trait that we do is, okay, this has happened, now what? So we are always working on a situation and seeing it, okay, how can we solve it? So we anyways are not the people who sit back and say, oh God, this has happened and now we drain ourselves in it. We
Right.
all make sure that we find a solution. So it's that same thing like how we do it in events. We'll have to do it with this problem, which is COVID. And
Right.
second, I think the biggest thing we have to start doing is training our mind that right now, till we find a major medical solution, it is part of our life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Totally agree with you. Mr. Seth, slightly different question for you. Event tech is not a very old concept. It's been there, especially during the lockdown. It came about in a very big way. How will this sector realize its potential in your view? Where do you see it in next couple of years?
Sure. So I'll answer your question, but I'll also, want to
Sure.
say something on the overall situation of things, because I think there is a total lack of accountability which is there from the side of the government, and there is a lack of intent also. So I will not, be diplomatic in my opinion, and I will call it out. I think they are getting away with it because there is no, I would say, repercussion, or there is no outcome. If they ignore us, they can afford to do it. Okay. So maybe because, we are the people who organize things for other people. Why not organize the biggest protest? Because right now we are not getting noticed in the public eye. Okay. So we are having, like I have seen in last 2 years, that EMA and other all event community members are regularly going to the government and talking it out, and we have got some solutions also, but I would say they are just like putting a band-aid on a big cut, whereas we need much more. It's like just by giving us, say, permission to do 200 people event is not enough. We actually deserve to be saved. because what is actually happening is that it's very sad. The whole ecosystem is getting destroyed. A lot of people, we are talking about statistics, but these people on the panel would know that so many people have sold their houses, their cars, their savings to maybe save their company or to be relevant in this time. So it is actually a very sad situation for the entertainment industry. Like, it is appalling. I don't know why we have been so calm, but it has been really painful. I have spoken to MCs, I have spoken to artists. I know they had to move to a smaller house. They had to do maybe, get rid of their house helps. So the amount of impact that has happened to this industry is beyond ignorance. So we first of all, we need to get noticed, and maybe in a loud manner. Okay, so that is my take on this, overall situation.
Right.
Now coming to the
Right. Yeah, please add to it. Yeah. So I'm just wrapping it up. I have 2 minutes, but I want to go to Mr. Roy for his last final thoughts. Yes.
So I'll just take 30 seconds to tell what can happen to the event tech. So right now, event technology has got propelled due to, constraints in doing the experiential business. Okay. But what has happened is the future, which was maybe 10 years away, that means everything becoming virtual and digital, it has just got fast forwarded, and it has come to 2021 and 22. So I think more adoption from the event industry about technology, because we are the experience makers. It doesn't matter if we were using stage technologies earlier and we want to use digital technologies now. The experience industry has to evolve in terms of adoption, and then they will also be able to take advantage of the technology which is out there. So yeah, that's it.
Perfect. I'm so sorry, I'm short on time, but final comments, Mr. Roy, from you. So somebody raised the point that we just speak to each other in WhatsApp groups. How true is that? Second, what is your message? Tonight is very important. Tomorrow, of course, we will be looking at it. In some way, it does impact. What is your message or suggestion to the industry folks before this big day is coming? Yeah.
Ruhail, like I said, I think the important thing is to speak in one voice, be very clear about the agendas that we are setting and the expectation that we need. If we think that government is going to give us a handout, no, it's not going to happen. And Hari Om stated that very specifically. What we do need to do is convince the government that we are a story worth supporting. We are a story which will lead to the growth of export of services, will lend to the GDP, contribute to local economies, and most importantly, create jobs. We can do that. Each of us know that every time we do an event, the kind of impact that it has on the local economy is enormous. And that's something that we need to continue to drive home to state governments and local governments, and of course the central governments. The larger policy issues are many. You could look at tax incentives for corporates when they spend on culture, or they spend on as part of their marketing dollar for this industry. You could look at providing incentives for investment into event tech and into the event industry. We ourselves have been invested into by an international consortium. So we know what the benefits are of that. There needs to be much more, but we ourselves need to get our act together, file our taxes appropriately, learn to move beyond the concept of jugaad, and be contributing members to the larger economy and the country.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad we had this discussion. At least we're trying to raise a voice, and we really want this to become more vocal and more frequent as we move along, and we need your support. But thank you so much, Mr. Roy, Ms. Gaikwad, Ms. Saxena, and Mr. Seth for joining us. And of course, tomorrow is a big day. We hope it's a changed narrative after a few years, and we will, of course, together push for that narrative. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ruhail. Thank you, Business World. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.